We are basically going to talk to you about how you as a photographer can find your own profitable niche and turn what you love doing, which I'm assuming is photography, into something that you make some money out of, either on the side or as a full-time job. For people that don't know me, I'm Andrew Mason. I am a full-time professional photographer. I shoot mainly corporate portraits, and I shoot some musicians, and I do some corporate event photography. I also do a little bit of work for brands. I've been doing that for about 15 years now. Prior to that, I had what I would say was a normal job, and I worked in a lot of corporate environments, and I always thought that photography should be the thing that I should do. So I made the break from having a normal job to becoming a photographer. So I feel that I've learned quite a bit along the way about making that transition. I also run something called the 36EXP Photographers School, which does lots of training and event photographers in London. And I also set up something called the London Photo Show. What we're going to talk about is something that's really important to me, and I think it should also be important to everyone who's a photographer who wants to make money out of photography. So we're going to talk about what is a photography niche in the first place, and we're going to talk about how you should find your niche and why you should find that niche and why that is particularly important. And we will talk about some examples of niches just to give you a broad idea of the sorts of things that you can do and the variety of different things that you can, or the variety of different ways that you can make money out of photography. We'll talk about something that I think is important as well, which is the size of your audience. So you don't want that to be too broad and you don't want it to be too small. And then we'll go on to talk about what an ideal client should look like within your niche. And we will talk about what I consider to be what I call a bulletproof portfolio, which gives you the best chance of success and enables you to withstand competition and set up a sustainable business. Let's get straight on with it then. Okay, so an ideal niche. The reason that it's really important to me to talk to you about creating a niche is because that I speak to quite a lot of photographers through courses that I run and from meeting people, and also through knowing quite a lot of reasonably successful photographers, that people that are kind of at the stage where they have a job and they love photography and they love taking photos, they come to this with a view of, I have some great photos, I have a great range of pictures, I have some pictures of wildlife, some pictures of landscapes, lots of different pictures, some portraits, some shoots that I've done and some workshops that I've done. But they kind of then struggle with the idea of how am I then going to sell that existing work to people? Who am I going to find to buy my photography? And the way that I think that is looking at it is the wrong way around. Really, the way to look at becoming successful in any kind of small business, particularly photography, which is super competitive, is to first identify a niche that you're going to work in and people that you're going to serve, and then create photography specifically for those people. The thing is that as a photographer working on your own, you're never going to become, or well, maybe you are, but I think you stand a better chance of success if you find what I've written down here, a specialist genre of photography that you can call your own, where your skills and knowledge enable you to create photography that matters to a group of people. You kind of have to accept that you're not going to please absolutely everybody, and that you have therefore got to find your own niche of what you're doing that you become super successful at, and that when you become super successful, you can become the best of that, and the people that photography matters to, they will really care about it, and that those are the people that will pay you money. You kind of need to ignore everybody around the outsides of what you're doing and just really laser focus on your niche group of people that you're trying to focus on, that you're trying to make your photos for. So this is a little bit what I've just spoken about, but what a niche means is that you have to make a clear decision about who your photography is for. If you're going into setting up a photography business, you have to have it very clear in your mind exactly who you are creating images for. The difference between setting up a photography business and taking photos for your own personal pleasure is that when you're taking photos as a hobby or for pleasure, you're creating photos purely for yourself. When you are taking photos with the aim of making money out of them, whether that's either to sell the images to somebody or whether that is to get someone to book your services, you have to have a clear picture in your mind exactly who it is that is your ideal client. So finding a niche enables you to be very clear on who exactly your photography is for. If you're not clear on who your niche is, it's very difficult to then have a clear picture on your mind, and it's difficult then to have a clear picture in your mind of who exactly your photography is for if you're trying to please lots of different people. So finding a niche lets you laser focus and lets you really think carefully about who your end customer is. You should also, by having a niche, it also clarifies what your photography is for. So the two important things for creating a product with photography is that you know who it is for and you know what it is for. So knowing what your photography is for means that you know exactly what service you provide, you know exactly what value you add to people, you know exactly what pains you solve, what problems you solve, and you know exactly what you're helping your customer with. And that goes back again to identifying a key group of people that you know that you can help with your photography. If you've got a broad range of stuff of different genres of photography, you're not clear on who you are creating images for, and you're not clear on what purpose your photography solves for people. Without your photography solving a problem for a group of people, there's no reason for people to pay you money for what you do, whether that's buying images or booking your services. So you have to be super clear on exactly what your photography does and who it does that for. Another important factor in finding a niche is that it gives you the potential to be outstanding. So it's a big old competitive photography world out there with hundreds, if not thousands of photographers, all trying to make money out of photography. There are some fantastic photographers, and to make yourself stand out and be somebody that somebody wants to pay money to, you have to really stand out. And people have a lot of choice when it comes to photography. There are loads of great photographers out there. And so if you're trying to be just a really good general photographer, people are looking for a very specific service. They are just going to find someone that looks specifically for a photographer who provides a really good version of that particular service. So by laser focusing yourself onto one niche, it enables you to look at that niche and go, right, I am going to be the absolute best person at creating that type of photography for that audience. And that means that you will be really important to the few people who want to see that type of photography and want to pay for that type of photography. And that gives you the best chance of being outstanding, and being the best, if not the best at what you do, is by finding a niche. So going back to what a niche is a group of people with similar interests who you can clearly define, and that you can say, okay, I'm aiming to attract this specific group of people to like my photography. We need to talk about, if you're creating photography as a product, and a photography is something that people want to pay for, you need to work out when your photography matters to people. As I covered in the last slide, you are creating photography that solves a problem for people. People buy images and book photographers because it solves a problem. So if I talk about my own example of headshot photography, people don't have a headshot just because they want to have a nice headshot. People book a headshot because they want to get a new job. So the problem that my photography solves for people is that it enables them to get a new job. The problem that a wedding photographer solves his or her clients is that it creates memories for that couple of their really big day. It's not the fact that they just want to have some photos. The bigger picture is that the real problem that they have is that they want to make sure they remember everything about their day and they don't want to forget that. So whatever type of photography you create, you have to make sure that it solves a specific problem for a specific group of people. Photography matters to people when it matches their values. So this is where you are working with people who want maybe artwork or something similar to that, and their values are that they want to buy art off an independent artist, or it matches their values that they remember traveling to a certain place, or that they love a certain thing, or that they have an interest in wildlife or landscape or nature or fine art. So by matching clients' values, you have to know exactly who your clients are, and therefore you need to work out what the values are of the people within your niche that you can create images for and make purposeful and valuable images for. Photography also matters to people when it helps them achieve their goals. So if someone's goals is to have some outstanding artwork on their wall, or to document how their golf course looks, or to create an amazing picture of their pet, or to show off their fashion brand to sell more of their apparel that they're trying to sell, that is what you need to do. And this all goes back to knowing exactly who your niche is that you're trying to serve and making images that match that specific group of people. Photography also matters to people when it creates a connection, a memory, and also when it enhances their personal narrative, the story that they tell themselves, and that they are working with a photographer who is in the same group as them. For example, if you're talking about family photography, often the people that do that are other people with families, and that their personal narrative is that they want to work with people like that. So again, you're targeting that specific niche of people who are in that particular stage of life similar to you. Okay, so let's talk about how to find niche. One of the worst things to do in terms of finding a niche is to work with the images that you've currently got and try to fit them into an existing group of people. If you have some really nice photos and you try to sell them to people, what you're essentially trying to do is you are kind of going around with a key and hoping to unlock a door somewhere in a city that will open the door to your photography career. That's going to be something that's a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack, and potentially is only going to work if you are very lucky, or if you happen to open the right door, again by luck. So all the photographers that I've worked with in the past doing this sort of thing, the people who have had the best success are people that do photography that is a really good match for their photography skills. So this is a fairly obvious one, but if you love taking pictures of people and you're a great portrait photographer, you're obviously going to go into that. If you are really got great skills at product photography, that is obviously a good route for you to take. This is a really obvious one. You should also look to work in a niche that you have some interest in and you have some passion about. This means that, I mean, this is going to be a fairly long journey for you to create this photography business and run around creating images and finding clients and doing all that really difficult kind of stuff. So you need to make sure that from the start you have a passion, or at least an interest and an enthusiasm about working within this sector. So whether that is fashion or wildlife or landscape or people, you need to make sure that you do have a really strong connection to what that is. If it's something that you're not that interested in, you're just doing it because you want to create photography, that's fine. But quite quickly, in reality, and I can tell you this from my experience, working in photography soon stops being your hobby when you start doing it for a job. It's not to say that you stop loving it any way, shape or form. It just means that you're doing it day in, day out, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. So you've got, so if you end up working in a photography genre or area that you just don't like, essentially you're putting a lot of time and effort into working in a field that is kind of not that enjoyable. And I'm assuming that by taking part in this webinar, you're thinking of moving into doing something that you love. So make sure that you are particularly really passionate, interesting, and enthusiastic about the area of photography that you do decide to choose. Going back as well to the niche that you are looking at, you need to also have a strong indication and some confidence or knowledge that you can become the best photographer or nearly the best photographer at that type of photography. There's no point you deciding, right, I am going to become the best adventure photographer in the UK when potentially you know that you're kind of scared of heights and that you don't particularly like mountains anyway, and that you are kind of rubbish at landscape type photography. You need to really be aiming high to do this. You're not going to become an amazingly successful photographer just by being mediocre. Choosing your niche means that you have confidence in knowing that you can be hyper focused on that and that you can have a really good chance at being truly outstanding at what you do, so that the people within that audience that you're trying to attract look at your work and they see you as a beacon of one of the best people to work for, and you become the selection of a choice for them. This again goes back to being hyper focused. You can't become the best at absolutely everything. So the more laser focused you are, the better your niche is. If you choose the right niche, you're passionate about it, and you have great skills in that area, then you do have a chance of becoming the best at it. Another thing to think about for the niche that you choose is that it fits with your personality and your values. I would say that I am not a particularly detail focused person. So I would definitely not be the right sort of person to go into stock photography or into product photography, for example. Shooting small shiny objects would kind of be my nightmare, but I'm kind of reasonably good with people and I can form a relationship with them quite well. So that's why I end up doing portrait photography. I also can fit reasonably well into a corporate type environment. So I kind of tend to talk to a lot of bankers and lawyers and get on in an okay manner with them. And that helps me. So your personality is going to dictate what you do. You know, if you don't like dealing with people, you're not going to do people-based photography. If you don't mind sitting and being cold on the side of a hill for a long time, you're very patient, then maybe wildlife photography is what you should go for. If you're active, you're going to enjoy landscape photography, climbing mountains. So think carefully about what your personality and also your values are. You know, if you hate the corporate banking world, you're not going to work in that sector. If your values are around the environment and those types of you're going to enjoy working in those sectors more. So don't try to fit your personality and your values into something that aren't going to work for you, that you're going to find difficult to work with. Make sure that the niche that you choose does fit with your personality and your values. A next thing to look at really carefully, and actually a really important factor here, is you should think carefully about your non-photography knowledge and insight. A lot of people listening to this, a lot of photographers that I have met, are coming at this with some background and some career, whether they have interests or connections in other areas. So I'll speak, for example, about somebody that I know that became a dance photographer. So she had a daughter who went to dance school, and she knew a lot about the way that whole thing worked, which I had no insight into. She knew about the dance schools and the types of events that they had attended to, and she could use that to her advantage because she could attend those events, she could meet people, she could talk to people, and that kind of gave her the foot in the door that she needed to set up her business. Those types of insights combined with your photography are what are going to make you stand out massively from the crowd. You may find that it's impossible to be, say, the best dance photographer, but if you combine being the best dance photographer with a great amount of insight and knowledge into the way that world works, that suddenly bumps you up, and that combination of skills together gives you a really strong insight and a really strong advantage over other photographers who don't have that. So think carefully about what your other photography knowledge sorry, what your other non-photography knowledge is and what your non-photography insights is. Do you have particular networks in certain areas? Do you have connections with people? Do you know how a certain sector works? Do you know places that people go where they might need photography? Do you know a bunch of gallery owners? All types of different stuff that you know that might give you some kind of insight and some extra advantage over another photographer doing that. This is a really important one to think about, is how you can combine your amazing and unique insights and knowledge to give yourself a head start in photography. Another way to look at it is you might be great at teaching. You might also be great at writing. You might be great at shooting videos of yourself. So any other skills that you've got, if you're great at writing, then that means you can create good content and stories and a really good website. That will help you. If you're good in front of the camera, that is also going to take you forward. So what other skills, what other attributes do you have that can take you forward? Think about those and then try to combine those with your photography and look at areas where that unique combination of insights and skills is going to give you an advantage rather than just relying on the existing photos that you already have. And the final one on this is location, which is fairly obvious, but if you live in the countryside or in a beautiful outdoor type place, you're going to work niches where the people that you're going to be working with are going to be on your doorstep, and you're going to be able to create amazing photography around that. If you live in a big city like London, you're probably not going to be the world's best nature photographer, but you're potentially going to be the best corporate or business or event or street type photographer or urban type photographer. And also you're going to have different clients within your reach than somebody who lives in a countryside type location or a holiday resort or something like that. So think about how you can use your location to your advantage and what access that gives you to clients and particular niches and genres of photography that you could get into. Okay, so what I want to go through is some examples. I'm not going to go into these into great detail, but these are really just some ideas, and also a lot of these things are actual genres and niches of photography that I know that people have done that maybe you've not thought of them. So there are fairly random lists. I'm going to whiz through them and maybe stop and talk about some of them. But interior photography is taking photos of the insides of either bed sits or of Airbnb places or of fancy hotels or of fancy bars. People do that and they make good money out of that. And the next one on the list is horse photography. This is an interesting one. This is not one that I even knew existed, but I did meet someone and help them train them on some lighting because they lived in Surrey and they knew that there are a whole bunch of people who had very expensive horses and they wanted beautiful pictures of those horses. There were only 2 or 3 other people doing that horse photography, and there was a very small niche and a very small market. But because this person had a good knowledge of that area and knew some horse owners and had a big Jeep and a big car and lived in that area, they were able to maximize that and create some beautiful horse photos. She didn't need that many clients because these people would pay thousands of pounds for a huge print of their very expensive horse to go up on the side of their country house. So using that person's knowledge of a very specific genre and a very specific niche, she was able to create a very profitable and very sustainable business. The next one is golf course photography, which is another one which, again, you wouldn't even think of, but I do know somebody that did this, that was interested in golf, used that interest to start out shooting golf courses in their local area, and then expanded around the country and also took photos of professional golfers and golf events. So golf course photography is a thing. Who'd have known? Search golf photography on the internet and there's some amazing photographers who get to travel around the world doing nothing but shooting beautiful golf courses. Fitness photography, comedian photography. Again, I know someone who specializes in photographing comedians for posters. They got into that because they knew they were an actor and they started out doing actors headshots, and then they moved into that area and that whole niche opened up because of the connections that they had before they really, their non-photography connections were what got them into that. Art photography is another one. You can sell fine art through galleries. You can sell your art on market stalls, and you can sell your photos as art through various websites. You know, that's again, probably say we want to aim at getting represented by galleries. You need to make some good connections. If you've already got connections in that world, that's probably going to help you. And if you've also got some fantastic portfolio and publications behind you, that's one that's going to work. Portrait photography is something that I do, but portrait photography can be broken down into hundreds of different types of portraits, from family to babies to actors to business people to a million different things, to schools, to graduation, to all sorts of stuff. And you'll find that people that do that well, but they break it down into a specific area of that, and that's what they start from. So that's just another example. I think I have some more examples on the next slide. Yeah, classical musician photography, corporate event photography. These are all real examples. I do actually know someone who does fantasy book cover photography, and they are busy every week because they have a very specific group of clients who publish fantasy books. They take photos of people wearing fantasy outfits and do all the Photoshop, and they provide these books for these covers. He's probably the only person doing it, and he's probably the go-to person in that genre. But it just shows that you can get the super specific niche and make really good money out of it. Product photography, food photography, pet photography, theatre photography. And there are probably a whole load more that we could go on to, but we won't use the session for this. So what I hope you got from those slides is the sheer number of different niches and genres that you can go through, and also the fact that many of the people that I've met and photographers that have gone into a successful photography career have often done it by using a connection or skills or insight that they had, rather than purely going, right, I'm good at this type of photography, I'm going to go like this. They often build their connections and their network and then create their photography specifically for that audience. And that is something that I really want to get across in this session, is that, you know, you are not taking your existing images and trying to find people to buy them. What you're doing is identifying a need and an audience for your pictures, and then you are creating the perfect product for that audience and making it so that people want to buy that within that audience. Let's talk about how big your audience should be, or how big your niche should be. A really good thing to do is so this is after the way to really approach this whole niche thing is to think about what your skills are, what your passion is, where you live, what you can do, what you think you can become the best at, and then test out some ideas. Okay, well, I know a lot of people in the corporate world. I like people. Okay, I'm going to become a portrait photographer, a corporate portrait photographer. Even though really what you love is travel photography, you can translate that ability and that love of travel photography into a different type of photography. So the best thing I think for you to do is to aim to get you started for the smallest viable audience. So this means being really, really super focused on one particular audience. Better to be too small than too broad at this stage, so that you go, right, I am going to be the best pug photographer in South London. You know, so you could literally spend your day walking around Clapham Common and Tooting Common and Brockwell Park looking for pug owners and show them your card, and they would not be able to resist having you take their amazing picture of their beautiful little pug. The issue with that would be that you would soon run out of customers. But what you can then do after you've identified and mastered and dominated the smallest viable audience, which you should be able to do if you do it right, is that you can then give yourself the ability to expand into similar related niches. So in my weird example of taking photos of pugs in South London, you could take photos of pugs throughout the whole of London. You could also take photos of other breeds of dogs, and step by step you expand your audience, you expand your niche, but it's still related to what you're doing. You take photos of all types of pets in the Southeast London, you become the best pet photographer in the Southeast of England. You know, you have a good, profitable, very viable business, which you've expanded from the smallest viable audience. So that is a key thing to aim for right now. If you're not too sure what to go for, if you're thinking of 2 or 3 different areas, if you're feeling a bit wishy-washy about who it is that's going to buy your photography, really narrow that down and really aim for this thing called the smallest viable audience that you know that you can laser focus on and become absolutely the best person out there at what you do, and that you can find those clients. But don't be kind of crazy and go, right, okay, it's going to be so small and no one else, and it's not related to anything else. But make sure you do have the passion, you do have the skills, and that smallest viable audience can be expanded into something that is much more viable in the long term. Don't try and be broad, and don't try and be pleasing to everyone at this stage. The best thing to do is be the super best at one particular thing. It can be a good idea if you can to try to estimate the size of the total audience. So if we talk about, say, wedding photography here, you can get publicly available figures on the number of people that get married in a country at any time in any year. So that gives you exactly the number of people doing that. And you can also work out what they pay on average, so that you know that the market for wedding photography in the UK is £1 billion, and that you know that that is a viable market. There's obviously lots of competition. But you can also do a little bit of estimation if it's not quite so obvious. If we talk again about dance photography, we can work out how many people are enrolled at dance schools, how many people are professional dancers, and then we can do some kind of estimation. Okay, well, there's 50,000 people in my local area. If I work out that I'm going to get 2% of them to become my clients, you have got probably enough there to work with. So, if you're worried about your audience being too small, just try to work out some sums in your head and do a bit of research about how many people are going to potentially need your services. And that will give you an idea of whether or not you do have enough people in your audience. Like I said, you can, if you find the audience is way too small, you can expand it by looking at similar related niches. But if you think that you need to, if you are looking at this and going, okay, well, I can't really clearly identify exactly who it is my photography is for, I can't really identify why they would need it, that probably means that you need to constrict and hone your audience a little bit more to be a little bit more specific. So, what you're doing at this stage really is just creating some ideas based on your skills, your attributes, your enthusiasm, where you live, all those different things that we spoke about at the start. And you are coming up with some ideas for niches that you can then expand or contract and work out what you want to focus on. Another thing to look at is whether the audience that you're looking at is growing or shrinking. If it's really small right now, but you think in the future it's going to get bigger and bigger, then that's a really positive sign. It probably is worth investing in. But if the market is shrinking and getting smaller and smaller year by year, less and less people doing a certain thing, or less and less corporate events happening, which they are right now, it's probably not worth investing a whole load of time and energy into a market that is shrinking. And also think a little bit about how much do people pay. So audience size in terms of running a business is not purely about numbers of people. If people pay a lot of money within that niche or that market, you might only need 12 clients a year to make it viable if they're each paying £5,000-6,000 for the photography and a huge amazing print or something like that. So a small audience can be good if that's a big high paying audience that you can really become good at. But if people are not paying very much money for what they're doing, then you're going to need to know that you're going to have to attract lots and lots of clients to make your business viable. So do the calculation based on how many people you think are in the audience that you're looking at, but compared to how much they're going to pay, and then work out, right, really, is that actually going to work? Okay, and then so as I keep saying, this is really just to test out some of your ideas. But if you identify a niche or an audience that you want to work with, if it becomes like your shortlist, okay, potentially I'm good at this, I like this area, I've got good connections here, and you think, okay, this looks like it could be something that I want to pursue. The next thing I want you to do is think about what type of clients you will find in that niche or that audience. Good clients and bad clients. Good clients and bad clients. I don't define good clients and bad clients by how nice they are, how demanding they are, any of this type of stuff. But a good photography client has certain attributes, and I'm going to go through these now. So the very first and most basic attribute that you should, when you think about your audience, your niche, you should, from a very broad perspective right now, I mean, you can go into do marketing. We can talk about that in later sessions if you want to, but you should, when you think about your audience or your niche, be able to think of some very broad, high-level ideas of how you could find clients. If you think it's going to be totally impossible or very difficult to find clients, even though you know they exist, then either you haven't identified your niche or honed your niche well enough, or that is probably the reason. If we think about certain areas such as, say, stock photography, you can find stock photography clients by working through stock libraries. So, you first straight away, you have got a way of finding clients. If you talk about wedding photography, you can effectively find wedding clients by going to wedding fairs. I don't want you to think of, okay, I've not got a portfolio now and all that sort of stuff. Don't worry about that. But just think in the long term, if you got into this, would it be relatively easy to find, or not easy, but could you work out ways of finding clients? For me, I do a lot of corporate portrait photography, and that is actually quite a difficult client to find. And I have to rely on people finding my website, and that's taken me a long time. The reason that it's difficult to find corporate portrait photography clients is that it's always a different person from lots of companies. When they contact me, it's a different person in a different position. It could be a marketing manager, it could be a PA, it could be the office manager, it could be the facilities manager, it could be the business owner. So I can't identify who I should reach out to. I used to do outbound marketing. Also, it's such a broad, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses out there, and it's impossible to identify a time when they might want to pay for my photography. So I've never found a reasonable way to do outbound marketing. I've had to rely on inbound. So that's how that works for me. If I didn't have that inbound route for corporate headshot photography, I would struggle with that. But on the flip side, I also do corporate event photography, and that is quite easy for me to find clients because I can work out when events are going to be and work out who is organizing the event, and I can reach out to people. So I can identify a way of finding event photography clients. So think about, if you're selling art, how would you sell art? How would you find people to buy your art? If you're shooting fitness photography, how could you reach out to, you could probably quite easily reach out to fitness professionals, personal trainers and fitness brands. So, think, within the niches that you're considering, could you find clients? That's the number one thing you need to be able to do to make this viable. The second thing, you're not going to get all four of these in any client. Well, if you do, you're doing them, you've kind of struck gold. But another great thing that clients do is repeat business. So some clients that are just one-off jobs are great, but the best types of clients are ones that come back and buy from you again and again and again, because you only have to invest the time and the energy and the money in finding them once, and then they come back to you again and again. And that is kind of like free business coming your way. All businesses love, any photographer, anyone running a business loves repeat business, because it means that you've done a good job. You're not having to invest any more time and money and energy in finding more clients, because you're getting your clients come back to you again and again. So think about how often people would buy your services or images from you. Again, stock photography works because the same image can sell again and again. Wedding photography doesn't work for repeat business because people generally only get married once. Family photography, maybe that happens once every few years, so that's kind of okay. But if, for me, event photography works well for that, because business events happen every 2 to 3 months. So think about, within the genre and the niche, think about what is the what is the realistic prospect of repeat business? You know, every 5-6 years is not really that good repeat business, but if it's several times a year or even once a year, you build up your client base, it probably is good. That is a good sign. Another thing to talk about is something called network effects. Network effects are really another really great thing, and this works really well for a lot of personal type photography. So things like families and babies and that sort of thing. Mums and dads and families will recommend a family photographer to lots of their friends because they're connected to a lot of very similar people. So think about within your niche and what you're trying to do. Are the people in that niche or that audience connected to lots of similar people who all have the same interests and all might have a need for your services? If you do that, you have this thing called network effect. And that works really well in things like wedding photography because lots of brides and grooms know lots of other future brides and grooms who are likely to want your services in the future. Works for families and probably pets, and it tends to work better for consumers rather than working for businesses. So if you can find a niche or a genre with strong network effects, strong networks of people, similar people in a similar position who are going to have a similar need for photography, that's a really good sign that you've got good clients in the niche that you're looking at. And the final thing is exposure. So that doesn't mean a photography-based exposure. This means, would creating images for this group of people create exposure? Would they be likely to share your work widely on Facebook, on Instagram, or publish it on websites or in books or in magazines, or put it on the side of bags with your name somehow associated with it? If the photography that you do creates exposure for you, you know, you kind of get this viral effect that the work that you've done gets shared widely, and then you just get more and more clients coming your way. And that can be a really, really powerful way of attracting new clients. So, you know, if you're comparing 1 or 2 or 3 different niches or audience that you might want to go into, think about these factors in terms of what an ideal client looks like in that niche. Firstly, you definitely need to be able to find clients. Just going back to that one, if it's hard to find and expensive to find clients, but when you do find a client, they pay a lot of money, that's still worthwhile. But if you have to spend a lot of time and energy to find low value clients, that's probably just not going to be worth your time. So you definitely need a way of effectively and cost effectively and time efficiently finding clients. And then ideally you want at least one of the other 3: repeat business, network effects, or work that creates exposure for you. If we talk about, for example, wedding photography again for this, you can identify ways to find wedding photography clients. You can probably not get any repeat business from wedding photography clients. You may get the kids in a few years, but that's not really amazing amount of repeat business. Wedding photography clients do have really strong network effects because they do have lots of other people at their weddings who are going to get married in the next few years and who probably will want to work with you to do a great job, and you'll get good recommendations. And wedding photography clients do probably give you lots of exposure because they share your work widely. They want to show it off to their friends through social media and albums and prints. So for a wedding photographer, you get 3 of these 4 things, and that makes that a really good and viable business model. So you should try to look, when you're assessing which genre or niche to go to, you know, you should be able to get the top 1 of this list, but if you get the other 2 and 3 and 4 as well, then you're definitely onto a good thing. And finally, within your niche that you're looking at, think about whether you can create something that I would call a bulletproof portfolio. So if you talk about a very extreme example of this, say, I know that you're never going to do this, but say you decide to go into passport headshot photography. That is kind of a bit of a nightmare of a genre. Not that you're going to do it, but I'm going to use it as an extreme example because if we look at this list here, passport headshot photography is anyone can do it without you. It is easy for anyone else to do. There are loads of people that could do the same thing. It's not unique or remarkable, and it's impossible to do it any better than your competitors. So a niche that provides you with the ability to do these 5 things gives you the ability, shows you that it's worthwhile investing your time and money and energy and effort into creating images that have real value for people because of these things. So what you want to aim to do with your portfolio in your niche is to create images that it's impossible for clients to do without you. If you're creating photos that a client can do with their own phone or get a friend to do for them fairly easily, you're never going to build a sustainable business, because people will be easily able to do it themselves. And why should they pay you to do it? You should also you should also look for niches where it's difficult to achieve great images in that niche. If you spend a lot of time creating lots of photos, but it's so easy for anyone else to copy what you're doing in terms of style or types of photos, then people will just come along and they'll do it better and cheaper, and you'll just be in this environment where you're just constantly getting bartered down on price, and it's just like a commodity that you're creating. So aim to work in niches where the images within that niche are difficult to achieve. Difficult to achieve can mean, it is difficult to achieve natural portraits of people, or it is difficult to create engaging event photography. It is difficult to create really good documentary style wedding photography. It is difficult to achieve fast action sports photography sometimes. So, invest your time and your money and your effort into creating images that are difficult for you to achieve, because that means it's difficult for others to achieve and you will stand out more. Also, try to look for genres where you can create a style or a type of photography that there are not hundreds and hundreds of other photographers all trying to do the same thing. So again, going back to wedding photography, there are hundreds and thousands of wedding photographers, but the ones that do it well are probably trying to do something that there's not hundreds and thousands of other wedding photographers trying to do the same. They're creating something that, linked to the next point, is unique or remarkable, that there are only, people will look at what they do and they think, yeah, that is unique. There are not many other people doing that, and some people won't like it, but enough people will, and then you can attract those people that do like that type of photography that you've created, and they will like it enough to only want to work with you. So make sure what you're creating can be in some way unique or remarkable, and also make sure that what you do is better than your competitors. If you're creating, no matter what genre or niche of photography you go into, you're going to face competition. Unfortunately, it's the way it is. So make sure what you're doing is better, or at least as good as the very best of your competitors, to give yourself the chance. So don't go into a niche where you don't think you can create something that is better than what your competition is doing. Don't go into a niche where you think you are going to be below average or even slightly above average. Make sure that you go into a niche where you know that you have the ability to be better than your competitors. Okay, so that is the end of this session. I hope you found it useful. Basically, what we've talked about then is using your skills and attributes and personal insight and network to create a photography niche for yourself, not using your existing images to try to fit into a market. And we've talked really what it is all about is identifying a specific niche that you can dominate, that you can find ideal clients, that you can create a bulletproof portfolio, and that you can create images specifically for that audience that those people do want to buy. And that is the right way to create your own photography niche. Not being a generalist, being a very specific photographer who is the best at what they do and starts off by working with a minimum viable audience